following podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca. Like what you hear? Want more of it ad-free, uncensored, and earlier? Sign up today at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca and start getting more for as little as $2 a month.
Don't miss your favorite superstars take center stage to forge the future of the hottest new brand in WWE.
What's shaking, kids? The Jeff DeHaan here with another rousing edition of Forging the Future. Of course, it's your home for NXT at WrestleMedia.ca. And as usual, WrestleMedia, it's where everything is wrestling. And wrestling is everything, my babies. That's right. And it's a busy weekend once again. I mean, it feels like we're only finally recovering from the busy week that was SummerSlam week with TakeOver and all the various independent shows that went on throughout that weekend. Incidentally, you can catch all sorts of coverage from that whole weekend from The Lasting Mark and also Women Crush Wrestling. Jenny's back and finally gets to talk about what she loved about it. You get to hear all of Mike's stories. You get to hear some stories from Danny lately about going to Fighting Back. You get to hear how much Adam hates MJF. And all that is just by listening to everything on WrestleMedia. And if that's not enough and you want more, well, you pay to play, kids. You go to patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, and that's where you can support us financially, which, by the way, if you do, we appreciate you more than words can say. And I know that's a cliche thing to put down, but genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, we do appreciate any support that we get. But monetary support is awesome, and we try to compensate you for said support with extra content, longer episodes. You know, you get the whole full-length episode and you get bonus content. If we reach one of our stretch goals, we release something like the I Was There series that we released. And if you don't know what that is, it was all us various hosts of WrestleMedia talking about live shows that we were at. And we might do a second season of that if we hit another stretch goal. And you might hear a lot of us talk about TakeOver or some of the shows that we were at during SummerSlam week. So it is well worth your money. But even if you can't, say you just, life happens and, you know, you got family and jobs and extracurriculars that you can't give up, things you're passionate about, you don't have any money to put towards Patreon, that's fine. Just hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button. That's how you can help us out. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, tell anybody to check out WrestleMedia. You know, like 10, 15 years ago, podcasts weren't that huge. You had like Kevin Smith and Joe Rogan and like Adam Carolla. He seems to be the guy that kind of really got podcasts going in pop culture. You know, that was like it. And now they're everywhere. So if you're taking the time to listen to our little corner of the internet, I thank you, and WrestleMedia thanks you. Got off on a little bit of a shilling tangent there and wasn't trying to, but as I was set off the hop, it's another busy weekend. 3 big events happened yesterday. New Japan Wrestling's Royal Quest, NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff, and of course, AEW's All Out. I'm not going to talk about any of those because AEW hasn't even started yet. Little peek to Inside Baseball. I'm recording this on Saturday. So, All Out hasn't started yet. And I haven't watched TakeOver Cardiff yet because it's too much all in one day. But thankfully, it's the Labor Day weekend. So my plan is to watch TakeOver Cardiff today. Today being Sunday. I realize it's getting confusing because I'm using both the release date timeline, but also the actual timeline of when I'm recording this. And, it's just getting all kinds of confusing. On Sunday, my hope is to watch TakeOver Cardiff, and I'm going to be watching, or I guess if you're listening to this on Sunday, have watched All Out Saturday night. But still, a very busy weekend. I'm very curious about Royal Quest, but at the same time, I don't really get a chance to catch up with a lot of New Japan. Although there's been a lot of really interesting developments lately with Kenta joining the Bullet Club and a few other things I just can't recall off the top of my head right now. But some interesting things for sure. But that's the one drawback to this embarrassment of riches of wrestling that we have to choose from is you can't watch them all. They're not Pokemon. Oh, that was a horrible joke, Jeff. So terrible. I still stand by my reasoning, though. You can't watch everything, so you really do have to pick and choose. I put my focus on NXT and AEW, but once NXT makes the switch and AEW comes on TV, I'm not even sure if I'll have time to watch both. At least not in the same capacity that I have been with NXT now. Now, on the plus side, with NXT moving to USA, it's entirely possible that WWE might start using their YouTube channel for NXT the way they do with Raw and SmackDown. For any who are unaware, when it comes to Raw and SmackDown and they show clips and highlights on YouTube, they'll show the match finishes and everything. You get to see what happens. You can more or less keep up just by watching what they show on their YouTube channel. With NXT, as of now, and for all of NXT's existence, they haven't. They've been very strategic to not show the finishes because they want people to tune in to get the network and to catch NXT there, because the only place you could get NXT was the WWE network. So now that it's moving to USA, part of me wonders if they might start treating NXT a little more like they do Raw and SmackDown. And if that's the case, I might be able to use YouTube to keep up with NXT and then still try to watch AEW. Although to my knowledge, I don't think All Elite has announced any Canadian television station. So far, it's still just TNT, which I might be able to get. We've got a Bell Express View satellite dish here. I think I got TNT. I'll have to look into that. But I am a little surprised that they haven't announced like TSN or something to be airing in Canada. But there's still about a month left before it officially airs, so maybe we'll get something yet. But it's going to be a jam-packed month between now and then. Word has it that WWE is planning on, wait for it, holding, wait for it, another draft. Wow. I didn't think I would be able to audibly hear the air go out of the room like that. Impressive. Yeah, I'm disappointed too. I've never been shy about talking about how disappointed I am in not so much in drafts or superstar shakeups in WWE as a whole, but just how little they stick to them. I mean, I'm genuinely curious, and I should have looked this up, what the actual length of time was from the superstar shakeup that happened in Montreal until they basically stopped talking about the wild card rule. Because it was only like a week or two before they started bringing people over from show to show and, you know, using the wild card rule as the reason for it. And then the wild card rule was apparently like 3 or 4 people from each show. And then suddenly some weeks it was 4 or 5. But then like the New Day counted as 1 or something. I don't know. And then they just stopped talking about the wild card rule. And people hopped between shows all the time. And it was kind of pathetic. Like, why bother? And yet here they are doing it again to solidify the rosters of Raw, SmackDown, and subsequently NXT. It's just annoying and kind of disappointing. But it did get me to thinking of something interesting. If they're going to be holding another draft and they're going to want to really shake things up for NXT, no pun intended, along with Raw and SmackDown, it got me kind of thinking who I would like to see come from the red and blue to the black and yellow, and who from NXT I think would be better suited making a move to one of the other 2 shows. So that's what I'm going to start off with this week. I've compiled a bit of a list. Now, while I did give this some thought, it was really per show. So this model as a whole, if you look at who I would send to Raw, who I would send to SmackDown, who I would send to NXT from Raw and from SmackDown, it's not, if you did all of this change as a whole, it wouldn't probably add up and your rosters might be a little lopsided. But it's not meant to be a perfect plan. It's more just looking at each show in kind of an isolated capacity and just who I would like to see go to either one. I didn't talk about anybody moving from Raw to SmackDown or SmackDown to Raw or 205 Live or anything. I guess I could have picked some 205 Live guys to go to NXT, but oh well, maybe another time. Or maybe if I have some more time at the end, we'll see. But yeah, so, and to say, you know, I'd pick these people from Raw to go to NXT and these people from SmackDown is kind of a moot point anyways, as I said, because they don't really have their own separate rosters as of right now. So it doesn't really matter. But I stuck with that model anyways. So we'll start off with the people I would like to see go from Raw to NXT. Now, there's not a ton of huge names. I mean, there's some names here, don't get me wrong. But I actually don't think I have a single former WWE heavyweight champion or like universal champion on this list. Because, and I said a lot of this last week in my kind of rantings and ramblings, I don't want to see a lot of the NXT roster currently get overshadowed by, you know, having a Roman Reigns or whoever on there. I kind of see NXT as the show for the workhorses. So that's a lot of what you're going to see here. It's not necessarily super gimmicky because I find, you know, Raw is the entertainment show. To an extent, SmackDown, in a lot of ways, I found was the workhorse show and has been of the 2. But now that you have the 3, I could see NXT being the wrestling show. And I could almost see the 205 Live roster being folded into SmackDown and have SmackDown be a lot more of the high risk, high flying show. You know, like, not everybody's going to be small on that one, but I could see you've got your Alis, your Andrades and stuff on SmackDown. I could see that becoming the norm on the blue brand. But right now, I'm talking the red brand. So, who would I like to see go from Raw to NXT? Well, first, it's Bobby Lashley. It's unfortunate that Lashley really hasn't done a whole lot since Lio Rush left. I mean, he's kind of started and stopped a little bit anyways. I found his turning heel was a great development for him, and it made me interested in Bobby Lashley more than I ever had been. So I liked the heel turn, but we've hardly seen him on TV lately. He hasn't done anything major since his partnership with Drew McIntyre and Baron Corbin sort of dissolved. So he's not doing a whole lot. So I think NXT would be a good fit for him. He could be a beast over there. I don't want to say he would dominate everybody because I don't want him to bury all the NXT talent. But it's a place where he could be that big fish. And I think he would really work well with a lot of people on there. I would love to see a Bobby Lashley, Matt Riddle match. Or Bobby Lashley and Keith Lee would be a giant hoss-off. Like those kind of matchups are what I would love to see. So that's why Lashley, I'm surprised he came to mind pretty quickly. And it surprised me because I've never really been a huge Lashley fan. I mean, I liked his heel run, as I said, but for the most part, I didn't care about him. But I think this would actually be something that would make me care. I think this would be a good fit for him. For sure. Next up, as I grab some water here, hang on. Would be Cesaro. Now, this is an interesting one because it's really looking like, keep in mind that I have not watched TakeOver Cardiff yet, that Cesaro's heading towards NXT UK following his old Kings of Wrestling partner, Chris Hero, aka Cassius Ohno. So if he's in NXT UK, and for the most part, I left NXT UK alone here because it's not going to USA like NXT is. But if Cesaro's going there, it kind of takes him away from Raw and SmackDown as it is. But I still stand by this decision. Cesaro's gone from the main roster back to NXT already, and it worked well for him. He got to have a great series with Sami Zayn, who was in NXT at the time. And he kind of formed a partnership with Tyson Kidd, which led to them coming to the main roster as a tag team and really lighting things up and really reinvigorating Cesaro. It seems when you're on the main roster, Cesaro pretty much flourishes as a tag team guy, but isn't given a lot of chance as a singles guy. But I feel like NXT is a place where he could be that singles guy. And I would love to see him have matches with the likes of Johnny Gargano, or even an Adam Cole, and even guys who are a little lower on the card, like a Roddy Strong. Any of the Undisputed Era, quite frankly, would have phenomenal matches with Cesaro. You could even rejoin Cesaro with Cassius Ohno and have them take on the Undisputed Era. Those two versus Fish and O'Reilly, like, come on. Oh, and plus, if they were to either have those two join forces again or have a feud between Cesaro and Ohno. And I know Ono's on NXT UK as well right now, but I mean, certain guys, look at Pete Dunne. Certain guys can kind of flip-flop back and forth between both NXTs. But man, like what Cesaro could do for Cassius Ohno, either as an opponent or as a tag team partner, would be phenomenal. And as I said, it's worked for Cesaro in the past. It could work again. Plus, he's enough of a veteran now that he could really help. I don't want to say train, but kind of coach a lot of the newer talent that are there as well. Next up is Samoa Joe. He's one of the bigger names that I'm sending down, but he's another one that I think would be a perfect fit. You know, he's got a lot of that gritty. I don't necessarily want to say smash mouth style, but for lack of a better term, like he's a great striker, but he's a great submission guy and a mat guy. Like he's another one that, you know, you put Samoa Joe against Matt Riddle and you might really see some magic happen. Joe could probably do some amazing things with Velveteen Dream. Joe is someone who I find can work with almost anybody. You can throw him in there with high flyers, like, you know, look at a lot of the feuds he's had, you know. He had a fantastic match with Brock Lesnar, where Joe was the small guy in the match. But then you look at the matches he's had with Rey Mysterio and, you know, Seth Rollins. Like, Joe is one of those guys who's extremely versatile, much like a Rey Mysterio or like, say, a Chris Jericho, who can work with just about anybody, any style. You know, he can adapt, he can make it his own. He's also a very underrated promo. And I don't think anybody's crapping on Samoa Joe's promos, but I don't know if people kind of realize how good he is on the stick. This is a guy who makes scripted promos sound like they're completely, you know, off the top of his head. He's fantastic. Just look at what he did in his feud with AJ Styles from a year or two ago. You know, Samoa Joe's only real drawback is staying healthy. He's been a little injury prone in his time on the main roster here, but he's been pretty healthy for the last while. And I think this would be another one where it'd be a great fit and he could kind of mentor a lot of the people that are down in NXT. And my last two I'm going to say together because they're kind of a package deal. That is Sarah Logan and Ruby Riott. That's right, I'm going to put at least 2/3 of the band back together. Everyone on this show knows how big of a fan I am of the Riott Squad. I loved them back when it was the Go Home spot, and I used to actually talk about all the WWE shows. How I had the time to keep up with that, I do not know. I was so sad when they split them up, and they're not doing anything with them. Now I get it, Ruby's down and out with surgery. Who knows when she'd return. So this would be kind of, if this were to happen, it would be kind of a long con sort of thing. You know, like maybe you just have Sarah go over and then Ruby showed up afterwards once she was healthy. But I think it would be a good spot. I mean, Sarah hasn't done anything outside of main event since they split up the Riott Squad. And Ruby, I'm not sure if she did anything prior to needing surgery. I don't know if the surgery was from an injury or if it was just something she needed and finally got done. But either way, I mean, they haven't done anything with either of them. So I would love to see them reconnect on NXT and really show what they can do and kind of, I don't want to say give the NXT women's division a shot in the arm, because the NXT women's division isn't necessarily in bad shape, but I think they could definitely bring their own flavor and style to NXT. Plus, Ruby's got a great history there. Like Sarah didn't spend a lot of time in NXT, and when she did, a lot of times she jobbed. Whereas Ruby, she had a lot of great battles over the NXT Women's Championship, so she does have a real history in NXT, and it would be nice to see her return.
Hey, this is a commercial for patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, where you can get early access to episodes of your favorite WrestleMedia shows, get full uncut and uncensored versions of your favorite shows, and more. Don't want to hear this commercial on your podcast anymore? Sign up at our main event tier and get these episodes ad-free. Want to hear your own commercial here instead of ours? We've got tiers for that too. Visit patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca and join the WrestleMedia revolution today.
So that rounds out my choices to go from Raw to NXT. But what about the blue brand? Who do I have on the blue brand to go to NXT? Well, you can probably guess one of them. And I'm going to start where I just ended off. Yeah, Liv Morgan. I'm completely rejoining the Riot Squad. Those three had fantastic chemistry. I really loved what they did together. And while WWE might have plans for Liv Morgan, I don't know what they are as of yet. So as a result, I'm saying, you know what? Send them to NXT, put them together. The last time we saw Liv, and the only real thing she's done since the split of the Riot Squad was a few weeks ago, where she kind of tried to stand up for, I guess it was a month or two ago now, stand up for herself, and as a result was put into a match with Charlotte Flair, and after the match, Liv took Corey Graves' headset and said something about, I guess it's time to get real or whatever, and word is she was going to get a gimmick overhaul. But since we don't know what that is as of yet, I'm going to say get the band back together. I love me some Riot Squad, and I think the three of them together in NXT could really, the things they could do with Candice LeRae or Io Shirai if they decided to make the Riot Squad baby faces. It's just nuts. And you almost could have them be baby faces considering the amount of heels that are in NXT. Like you look at Aaliyah and Vanessa Bourne, the aforementioned Io Shirai, technically the Horsewomen, although I'll get to them in a little bit. There's a lot of options in NXT. If you wanted to keep them heels, you could have them feud with Mia Yim. I think Yim and Ruby could have a really good series. There's a lot of options here. So I love me some Riot Squad, but I've babbled on my love of them enough thus far. Let's move on to who else from Team SmackDown I would move to NXT. Speaking of ladies, we might as well stick with it. The second lady from SmackDown that I would move over to NXT is Lana. I know, Lana's never really been accused of being the best wrestler in the women's division by any means. But obviously she's not terrible because they have her wrestle on house shows all the time. So she's at least serviceable, and I realize that's not necessarily a compliment, or it probably doesn't sound complimentary to say she's serviceable, but she's someone you could have in there as an extra body. Maybe you could have her form an alliance, much like Aaliyah and Vanessa Bourne did. Maybe even with Aaliyah and Vanessa Bourne, who knows? And she's someone who could, fit in a duo or a trio like that, or even just continue where she started in more of a managerial role, because I'm also bringing Rusev along as well. So you have Rusev and Lana back in NXT. I think it would be a good spot for both of them. I think much like Alexander Wolf going to NXT UK, I think this is something that might kind of appease both Rusev and Lana, who haven't been happy for a while. And for Rusev, I think the sky would be the limit. You could have him, feud with Adam Cole over the NXT Championship, feud with Velveteen Dream over the North American Championship. You could have him take on a Keith Lee or even a Matt Riddle. And I know I'm mentioning a lot of the same people, but those are the people that are, at the top of the card right now. But even like a Rusev versus Damian Priest, for example, or Rusev and Joaquin Wilde, like Rusev's one of those guys who could really help put over a lot of the younger talent. In fact, I think that's where I would put Rusev in there. I think I would have him basically taking on a lot of the people that you saw in that breakout tournament. Not just them. I'm not saying he'd focus on the tournament people, but like a lot of the younger talent. You could almost have Rusev come in and say, he's going to show all these new kids what the main roster is all about. Kind of in the same way that Cassius Ohno did when he turned heel, that he was going to take out all of Regal's shiny new toys, as it were. Only Rusev might be more successful. But that's what I would do with the Bulgarian Brute. Next up, Apollo Crews. This one's kind of self-explanatory. Apollo Crews has kind of always been sort of spinning his wheels on the main roster. It sometimes feels like they don't know what to do with him. I mean, he got some notoriety. I don't even know if I would call it success. So notoriety as part of Titus Worldwide. But he hasn't done a lot. I don't know if Crews has ever held any championships outside of possibly the 24/7 championship on the main roster. But he's a talented guy. Like, he really is. And you know what? He loves to smile. Team him up with Jordan Miles. Crews is a guy who can be a pretty good high flyer despite his size. And then you have someone who's an even better high flyer like Jordan Miles. And they both have this kind of smiling gimmick going. And it's not even necessarily a gimmick. I mean, maybe more so with Miles, I'm not sure. But Crews is just kind of happy to be there. And that's why he smiles so much. Imagine the two of them as a team. If they could click just right when it comes to chemistry, they could be unstoppable. That would be a fantastic team. And it would finally give Crews something to do. Someone else who not only has been spinning his wheels, he's been in park for months doing nothing, and that is Luke Harper. He wanted out of his contract, and WWE said no, but they don't use him. Bringing him to NXT could be something that could completely reinvigorate him, completely have him decide to stick around and not leave. He was very vocal on social media about how he loves to wrestle, and that's what he wants to do, but feels like he's not getting that chance in WWE and wants to go elsewhere, and they won't let him. And it's like, if you don't want other people to have your talent, but you don't want to use them, that's not fair to the talent. Forget the other companies you don't want to have this talent. That's not fair to the talent at all. To take away this thing that they love to do just because you don't want other companies to have them. But that's my own opinion, and I don't want to go off too much of a tangent. But Harper is someone who, all he wants to do is wrestle. So you know what? Let him wrestle in NXT. I feel like it would do for Harper what it's done so far with Breeze and Fandango. And I realize Fandango's only been in NXT for a couple weeks now. We haven't seen a ton, just a couple of matches. But it gives him that new outlet and that new place to, I don't want to say hone his craft, but to do what he loves to do, plain and simple. It's as simple as that. There isn't much else I can say. It's Harper loves what he does, and he can do it well. Like, I mean, look at some of the tag matches he had with Rowan in NXT on the main roster when the tag team division was starting to really, catch fire again a few years ago with the Usos, with the New Day, with the Shield, with the Rhodes brothers. Rowan and Harper were right in there and were putting on great matches. The Wyatt family versus the Shield was a fantastic feud. And Harper's a fantastic singles guy too. That wasn't a case of, oh well, he's a tag team guy. No. He's just a great wrestler, and he deserves the chance to showcase that and to even, again, mentor, and I know you're hearing that word a lot from me, but mentor some of that younger generation. Whether you make him a heel or a babyface, I think he probably works better as a heel and possibly prefers it. He's probably been a heel most of his career, but if need be, he could probably fit that babyface role as well. He doesn't necessarily have to be, a talker or a fantastic promo. He can still be his same gimmick and kind of be a babyface and just focus on going after heels. Or he could have him join forces with someone in the NXT locker room. I mean, the opportunities and the options are pretty endless when it comes to someone like Luke Harper, who's just so well-rounded and so good. And now we get to the biggest name that I would send to NXT. And I'll be honest, I flip-flopped on this one a lot. But I think this man would really benefit from the potentially lighter schedule that NXT has. With the weekly live show and the occasional house show loop, but certainly lighter than the main roster schedule. He would benefit from that. I think it would reinvigorate him as well, and he would want to, mentor that younger generation, and I know I'm using that for every single person on this list, but it doesn't make it any less true. He would enjoy it, because he's another guy that he just loves to wrestle. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter who against, he just loves to wrestle. And he doesn't take that for granted because it was almost taken away from him a few years ago. I'm, of course, referring to Daniel Bryan. He's the only former WWE World Champion that's on this list. But I think he could do a good job. If you want to bring Rowan down with him, that's fine. I mean, you could maybe even have Rowan and Harper be Bryan's bodyguards as such. But at least Bryan, the stuff he could do, could you imagine, the mat work that him and Riddle could have, or even him and an Angel Garza or a Jordan Miles. And Bryan's fantastic. Just fan-friggin-tastic. The stuff he could do would be phenomenal, and I would love to see him get in there. And as I said, he's the biggest name because I don't want anybody to overshadow NXT. But despite coming in as a former world champion, I mean, you look at the role he's had for the last few months since leaving the title picture. He transitioned so well into the tag team scene and former tag team champions with Rowan. And he just he fit right into that position. He transitioned so well into that from being a world champion, and it didn't seem like a step down. It didn't seem like he missed a beat. He can fit in anywhere, and that's why I think he would be phenomenal. And oh my God, would I love to see a match between him and Velveteen Dream. So much. So that's Daniel Bryan. That's why he's on this list. And that caps off my SmackDown to NXT list. Now all that's left is the reverse. Who would I send from NXT to Raw or SmackDown? Now this list is actually a little smaller. I didn't do like 4 or 5 to Raw and 4 or 5 to SmackDown. It's only that much total. But part of the reason for that is because NXT is still so developmental. Now, once they move to USA, they're not going to necessarily be a developmental territory, but a lot of people on the NXT roster still kind of need work. I didn't want to send too many bigger names away because you still want to have a good amount of your best, the best of the best of NXT on that roster. So a lot of the people that I'm getting rid of are ones who would almost be called up soon enough anyways. So we'll start things off right now with the Street Profits. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything from TV this week just yet, although I will be getting to TV soon enough. Depending on how long I've been going here, I'll have to check my time. All of TV might be squeezed onto the Patreon side of this episode, we'll see. But Street Profits have been appearing on Raw for the last few weeks, basically since Paul Heyman took over on Raw. And they're kind of a natural fit. Like, they're very, gimmicky, comedic, entertaining, but they can also go in the ring. They fit the Raw roster so well. And since they've already made appearances, anyone who watches Raw is already becoming very familiar with the Street Profits. So all it takes is to have them have some matches instead of just these backstage segments. And you're off to the races. Then you have fans who can see how awesome Montez Ford is, how unstoppable Angelo Dawkins can be. And that's the Street Profits right there. Imagine what they could do. Like, name me a team on Raw and tell me it wouldn't be a fantastic match between the Street Profits and them. Gallows and Anderson, fantastic match. Usos, fantastic match. Like, any team, it doesn't matter. Street Profits are so good and in a lot of ways so underrated. And even I enjoyed them at first, but the gimmick, it was very gimmicky, and it kind of took me a while to warm up to it. But they're so great, and even if you wanted to, I don't want to say split them up, but, even tag team guys will sometimes have the occasional singles match. Montez Ford is so fantastic. I would love to see what he could do in some one-on-one matches. But keep in mind, that doesn't mean I would split up the Street Profits. Following the Street Profits, my original thought was, if I move the Street Profits, Montez and Bianca Belair are married. But then I thought, you know what? That would actually be a good fit anyways. So my next one is Bianca Belair also moving to Monday Night Raw. While Bianca never did win the NXT Women's Championship, at the same time, what else does she have to prove in NXT? She's had phenomenal matches. against you name it. She's, other than actually holding the gold, she's done everything she needed to do in NXT. She doesn't need to prove herself anymore. And much like her husband and his tag team partner, name me a single woman on the Raw roster and tell me that they wouldn't have a phenomenal match against Bianca Belair. Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Dana Brooke, even. Like, there's... Bianca Belair is so good, and I kind of had to warm up to her too. Not as much as the Street Profits. But I remember the first time I saw Bianca Belair was actually in the first Mae Young Classic. One of the things I didn't like was how often she used the hair whip. It kind of did become a crutch in her matches. And I get that she probably just wanted to be noticed, and that's totally the right thing to do. But it became a bit of a crutch. And even once she was signed to NXT, for the first while, like she used it a lot. And in my opinion, kind of overused it. But over time, she would use it less and less. And I personally found it to be an improvement. And it's not that I don't like the hair whip at all. I just feel like there's a time and a place, and it's almost a big spot. A good example of this was her NXT Women's Championship match against Shayna Baszler. She only used the hair whip once in the match, but it was effective because it was a big, high spot. It was a high emotional moment in the match, and it fit, and it worked so well. So that's why Bianca grew on me, and that's why I think she would be phenomenal. I'm using a lot of the same words. I need an adjective dictionary. Ugh. Bianca Belair to Raw. Plain and simple. Alright, next up, sticking with the ladies, this one might get some eye rolls from people and a lot of disagreements. But hear me out. Shayna Baszler, Marina Shafir, and Jessamine Duke to SmackDown. I realize Shayna Baszler is your current NXT Women's Champion. Obviously, she would have to lose that championship before jumping ship. But much like Bianca, I mean, it's like, what else is there in NXT for Shayna Baszler? I mean, right now, she's heading into a feud. And again, I don't want to spoil anything from TV just yet in case you haven't seen it. But go check it out. She's heading into a new feud with someone I was not expecting. And it's got me looking forward to it. If she were to drop the title in that feud, or, you know, even to anyone. Like, Shayna Baszler has been so dominant. It's almost the way it was with Asuka. Only, like, Baszler's not undefeated, but she's so dominant. Like, what else does she have to prove? There's been so many times where I'm like, oh yeah, Baszler's probably going to lose the title here. And then she didn't. What more does she need to do to prove herself in NXT? Not a whole lot. And I feel like if she moved to SmackDown, she would have entirely fresh competition. And she could kind of, although Rousey was on Raw, she could kind of pick up where Rousey left off, so to speak. And if Ronda wanted to come back, you've got instant chemistry with her 4 horsewomen, and that is why I would bring up Duke and Shafir. I realize they still need a lot of work, but I also feel like they benefit from being on the same roster as Shayna Baszler. You know, it gives them a chance to have her sort of coach and mentor them, since she's actually been wrestling longer than they have. And if you bring Ronda back, she could do the same thing. While Ronda hasn't been wrestling for very long, she improved by leaps and bounds and so quickly that to have her and the remaining 4 horsewomen all together, I think would do nothing but help Shafir and Duke. Also, it helps if they're up there with Shayna, it helps to hide their negatives, hide their detriments by having, tag matches or having them be the hired goons of Shayna Baszler, so to speak. Whereas if you were to just move Shayna and leave them on NXT together, they lose that mentor / friend, and they're kind of forced to do it on their own, which could work out to their advantage if you put them in a sink or swim situation. But you could also have them in that situation on SmackDown as well, as opposed to on NXT. And finally, my last pick was one that actually surprised me as well. It's one that came to me late, but I think is fitting, and that is Angel Garza. I realize he hasn't been in NXT very long. He was part of this breakout tournament. I'm sure he's going to be sticking around, and he's someone that could really boost the NXT roster and really benefit from being on there. But he's so good. He's the one that I called to win the breakout tournament. I was kind of surprised when he got eliminated from it. But he's so good that I think you could send him right to SmackDown. I think while he's got the gimmickry down that he could fit in on Raw, I think his in-ring style would be better suited to SmackDown. I think you move Angel Garza to SmackDown, you have matches with Ali, you have matches with Buddy Murphy. You could have matches with Cedric Alexander, although I guess he's a Raw guy. Anybody from 205 Live that may wind up going to the SmackDown roster. You could really benefit from Garza, and he could fit in on there, and he's no stranger to 205 Live himself. So he could definitely benefit from that. And there's others too that I considered on this list, like Isaiah Swerve Scott as well. But Garza I went with because he's been the most impressive to me out of everybody in the breakout tournament. That is to say, Cameron Grimes surprised me, and Jordan Miles was also pretty impressive, but Garza was the one that really caught my eye in that tournament, and I could see him fitting in very well on the SmackDown roster. And taking a look at the time here, I have been talking for almost an hour about this, and once again, very surprised. That's like 3 weeks in a row that I've just kind of rambled on about some sort of NXT topic, and it got away from me. But what can I say? I love this show. I love the whole developmental aspect of NXT. So I'm going to cut it off here. Those of you who want to hear my thoughts on NXT and NXT UK television this week, hop on to patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, and that is where you find the goods. That's where you can be, a main eventer or even a mid-carder, and that's where you'll find the full shows, unedited, uncut, sometimes without commercials if you go to that main event platform. And you can hear everything I got to say about NXT this week. It was a great show. I can't wait to talk about it. NXT UK, the go-home show before TakeOver, all that good stuff. But you're going to have to go to Patreon to hear all about that, because I'm running out of time for this week, kids. That's it. That's all. The future's still unknown. I still don't know what's going to happen to this show once NXT moves to USA. If I keep doing it, if I don't, time will tell, kids. We'll see. But until then, I've been the Jeff DeHaan. Forge that future.